Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In today's episode, we continue accompanying the story of Diep and CEO James, a story that may seem peaceful on the surface, yet hides countless upheavals, overlapping emotions, and long-buried secrets from the past that have only just been stirred awake. In the previous episode, the once calm and simple life Diep shared with CEO James and little Nee was suddenly thrown into turmoil when a middle-aged woman unexpectedly appeared at their doorstep. No prior notice, no warning, her arrival felt like a cold wind blowing straight into the small home that had always been filled with warmth and family love. With weary eyes and a face deeply marked by time, the woman uttered a claim that left everyone stunned. She was Diep's biological mother, the one who had been separated from her daughter for decades. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Diep froze, her hands trembling, her mind going blank as if she were being dragged back into the past. Vague memories and long unfilled gaps in her life suddenly surged back. The truth came too abruptly, plunging Diep into profound confusion, caught between belief and doubt, between a fragile hope of being loved and a deep-seated fear of having been abandoned years ago. She didn't know what to believe, nor how to face the woman standing before her. Meanwhile, CEO James could not hide his own unease. He understood that beneath Diep's calm exterior was a heart violently shaken. In her eyes, he saw both a longing to confirm her origins and a fear that if the truth did not match her hopes, old wounds would be torn open once more. James said little, but deep down he realized that this was not just Diep's story, it was also a major test for the small family they were building together. For that reason, to clarify everything and to prevent prolonged pain caused by uncertainty and doubt, James took the initiative to suggest a DNA test. It was not an easy decision, because he knew that whatever the result, it would change Diep's life forever. Yet the truth, whether painful or joyful, was something that had to be faced. Diep remained silent for a long time after hearing his proposal. In the end, she nodded, as if forcing herself to step through a door behind which lay a fate that had been forgotten for so many years. From that moment on, all three entered days filled with tense waiting. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Every morning Diep woke up carrying a heavy, nameless weight in her heart. She tried to live as usual, tried to smile at little Nee, but deep in her eyes was an unease she could not hide. When night fell and everything grew quiet, questions surfaced one by one in her mind. What if that woman truly is my biological mother? Why did she leave me? And if the results don't match, will I be strong enough to face the truth that the hope she had just begun to feel has suddenly vanished? CEO James was always by her side, quietly observing and caring about even the smallest changes in Diep. He never forced her to speak her thoughts, only appearing at the right moments with simple yet reassuring actions. Sometimes it was just a firm of her hand, sometimes a short sentence, just enough to let Diep know she was not alone. Little Nee, though too young to understand everything, could sense the unusual atmosphere in the house. She became more obedient than usual, staying close to Diep more often, as if instinctively trying to preserve that fragile sense of peace. The days of waiting passed in heavy silence. Every phone call made Diep's heart tighten, every ring brought both hope and fear rising at the same time. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood that the DNA test results were the fragile line between past and present, between loss and healing, between old pain and the possibility of a new chapter beginning. And now, in today's episode, after all those long days of anxious and restless waiting, the DNA test results are finally revealed. The 3 days of waiting passed slowly, almost endlessly, longer than any stretch of time Diep had ever endured in her life. Every passing hour felt heavy, as if an invisible weight were pressing down on her chest. For Diep, time was no longer measured by clocks or sunlight outside the window, but by the tightening of her heartbeat each time she remembered that the test results had still not arrived. Every morning she woke up feeling as though she had stepped out of an unfinished dream. Morning light filtered into the familiar room, yet her heart felt strangely clouded. At times, she asked herself what she was truly hoping for: confirmation that the woman was indeed her biological mother, or a denial that would spare her from confronting the painful questions of the past. If that woman really was her mother, then why had Diep been separated from her for so many years? And if she was not, would Diep be strong enough to accept that the fragile hope she had just begun to feel had shattered? That inner conflict exhausted her, yet she could not stop thinking about it. During those days, James stayed by Diep's side without leaving her for a moment. He didn't press her with questions or force her to voice the feelings stuck in her throat. James understood that sometimes silence was the gentlest way to share. He quietly took care of the smallest things, reminding her to eat on time, pulling a blanket over her when she fell asleep on the sofa, silently making a warm cup of tea whenever he noticed her sitting absent-mindedly by the window. And each time he caught the distant, pensive look in her eyes, he would say just one sentence, softly but firmly: "I'm here." Just 4 words, yet enough to let Diep know she was not facing this uncertainty alone. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the atmosphere in the house felt quieter than usual. The fading sunlight painted the doorway gold, bringing with it an indescribable sense of suspense. Diep sat beside little Nee, her hand unconsciously stroking the child's soft hair, while her mind was somewhere else entirely. Just then, the phone vibrated, its sound clear and sharp in the stillness, startling everyone. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. No one spoke. James was the one who reached for the phone. He stood up, turning his back to Diep, listening silently to the voice on the other end. Time felt stretched to infinity in those brief minutes. James's expression gradually grew serious, his brows drew together slightly, his eyes focused with intense attention. He didn't say much, responding only with short replies, then slowly nodding, as if fully understanding what he was being told. When the call ended, James turned back. The look in his eyes now held none of the worry or tension of the past few days, but a rare sense of calm certainty and gentleness. He stepped closer to Diep, his voice low and clear with every word: "The results match. She really is your biological mother." In that moment, Diep felt frozen. The world around her seemed to stop. Her ears rang, her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. All the emotions she had suppressed for so many years, the unanswered questions, the nameless wounds, the long nights of loneliness, burst forth at once. Diep broke down in sobs, tears streaming uncontrollably. She pulled little Nee tightly into her arms, as if afraid that letting go would cause everything to vanish like a dream. Those tears were not only tears of joy at finally finding her roots, but also tears of pain for the years she had lived feeling abandoned, believing she belonged to no one. James stepped closer and gently wrapped his arms around both mother and child. He comforted Diep slowly, softly, as if afraid of hurting her any further. In that moment, he said very little, simply letting her cry and release the emotions that had been buried for far too long. A faint, relieved smile appeared on James's lips, the smile of reassurance, because the woman he loved, after so many years of being lost, had finally found where she came from. Not long after that, the mother returned, carrying a presence completely different from her first appearance. There was no longer any hesitation standing outside the gate, no more eyes filled with uncertainty and fear. This time, she walked straight into the house, each step slow yet resolute, as if she had fully prepared herself to face whatever awaited her ahead. The moment she saw Diep, all the emotions she had been holding back seemed to burst at once. Tears spilled before she could stop them, and she broke down in sobs, pulling her daughter tightly into her arms. Her embrace trembled but tightened fiercely, as if she feared that letting go even for a second would cause Diep to disappear from her life once again. Diep stood still in her mother's arms at first, confused and overwhelmed, but then her own tears quietly began to fall, soaking into the woman's shoulder. The two of them held each other for a long time. No words were spoken. Every question, every reproach, every explanation suddenly felt unnecessary in that moment. There were only muffled sobs intertwined, only trembling, desperate embraces trying to make up for decades of separation, for the years both of them had lived in absence and longing, each in their own way. From that day on, Diep's mother moved in to live with them. The decision happened naturally, without the need for much discussion, as if her presence in this home had always been destined. Her personal belongings gradually appeared, and small corners of the house began to carry the marks of an elderly woman, along with the familiar scent of time and memory. The small house grew warmer than ever. Mornings were no longer just the usual quiet, but now included the gentle inquiries of an older mother, the slow footsteps in the kitchen, the soft clinking of pots and pans. At noon, the dining table felt fuller with simple yet heartfelt dishes, food that nourished not only the body, but also the sense of togetherness. In the evenings, the warm yellow light spilled across the living room, illuminating faces gathered close together, along with conversations that seemed endless, about the past, the present, and the smallest details of everyday life. What moved Diep the most was the way her mother poured all her love into little Nie. She cared for the child with the tenderness of a true grandmother, attentive and thoughtful in every small detail. From daily meals and afternoon naps to leisurely walks around the neighborhood, everything was done with rare patience. She was willing to sit for hours listening to Nie tell her innocent, repetitive childhood stories without showing the slightest fatigue. Every time Nie giggled or ran over to hug her, the house seemed to grow brighter. Each time Nie called out Grandma, the elderly woman's eyes would fill with tears. It was more than simple joy, it was a feeling of being made whole again, of being given back a role she once believed she had lost forever. In those moments, Diep often stood quietly watching from a distance, her heart tightening and then softening again, as if something very deep inside her was being gently soothed. Diep gradually came to realize that her mother, too, was a woman who had endured immense loss. It was not only Diep who carried the pain of abandonment, that mother had also spent years living with regret, guilt, and an aching desire to make amends. Both mother and daughter, in different ways, were victims of fate. And now, being together, they were no longer searching only for answers to the past, they were healing side by side, day by day, through presence, through love, and through the simplest moments of family life. James stood quietly behind everything, keeping just enough distance for himself. He did not step into the tightly held embrace, nor did he speak to break that sacred moment. He simply watched in silence, his eyes following every small gesture, every tear that fell, and a very faint smile appeared on his lips. It was not a smile of curiosity or satisfaction, but one of reassurance, a man finally able to breathe a sigh of relief upon seeing that the woman he loved was no longer alone in this vast world. He was happy that Diep now had her mother by her side, a place to lean on not just in words, but in everyday presence. He was glad that the small house, which once echoed with lonely footsteps, was now filled with 3 generations, an elderly mother quietly tending to the home, Diep with a heart once wounded but slowly healing, and little Nie, bright as sunlight, binding everyone together with her innocent laughter. That sense of fullness did not come from material things or grand gestures, but from the feeling of having one another, something James understood better than anyone. What made James happiest was seeing Diep gradually change. Her eyes no longer carried the confusion and guardedness of the days she waited for the results. In their place was a gentle softness, a calm that showed itself in more frequent smiles and in the peaceful way she sat beside her mother and daughter. He realized that deep within Diep, what she had been searching for all those years was not an answer to the past, but a sense of peace, the feeling of belonging, of being loved without the fear of losing it. The days that followed passed gently, as calm as still water. There were no longer tense moments of waiting, no more heaviness from unanswered questions. There were only ordinary mornings that began with simple greetings, unhurried family meals, and quiet evenings beneath the warm glow of yellow light. Everything was so simple that Diep sometimes found herself wondering whether this was the life she once believed she would never have. And within that very simplicity, Diep found true peace, a peace that did not need to be tightly held or feared to be lost. James remained by her side, quietly as always, but in his heart he knew that from this moment on, the two of them had stepped into a new chapter of life. A chapter no longer centered on pain or the past, but on days that flowed gently, full and complete in a way they had never known before. But life is never made up of peace alone, and those gentle days, no matter how beautiful, are often just a quiet pause before another wave begins to rise in silence. Behind Diep's mother's smile, behind the warm family meals and the emotional sound of being called grandma, the past still lingers quietly like a shadow that has never truly left. There are memories that cannot be erased by tears of reunion alone, and there are fractures left by time that require more than mere presence to be healed. Diep's mother's past is still there, filled with years of obscurity that have never been spoken of. The choices, the upheavals, the fateful moments that drove mother and daughter apart for so many years, all remain scattered pieces that have yet to be assembled into a complete picture. Behind the silence of the elderly woman lie truths she has not yet found the courage to speak, or perhaps does not know where to begin telling. The secrets surrounding those lost years continue to wait quietly to be revealed. Why did Diep disappear from her mother's life? Who played a role in creating that tragedy? And during those years of separation, who were the people who appeared, who intervened, who left indelible marks that can never be erased? These questions still hang in the air like knots left untied, waiting for the day they might suddenly tighten again. Today's reunion, no matter how warm and moving, can it truly be complete when the hidden corners of the past remain concealed? Is love and forgiveness strong enough to face the truth when it is finally spoken? Or will the long-buried secrets once again disturb the life that seems so peaceful for this small family? What lies ahead for Diep, her mother, James, and little Nee? Deeper understanding, or new trials that force them to confront difficult choices? No one can be certain, for life has never promised a path that remains smooth forever. Everything still lies ahead, unrevealed and unnamed. And it is precisely these unspoken truths that will determine whether the happiness they hold today is strong enough to endure the passage of time. Stay tuned for the next episode to follow the story's unfolding developments.
We continue to follow the latest developments in the haunting.
Tạm biệt mọi người.